Section 5. Still Life. One day Helen came home with something large and flat wrapped in brown paper. "Look what I bought today," she said excitedly as she tore off the paper. "A painting to go over the living room couch." "Fruit in a bowl," Max said with a shrug. "Big deal." "This is fine art. It's called a still life," Helen explained, "and I think it's lovely." I dashed over to examine the painting, marveling at the colors and shapes. "See?" said Mac's wife. "Ivan likes it." "Ivan likes to roll up poop and throw it at squirrels," Max said. I couldn't take my eyes off the apples, bananas, and grapes in the picture. They looked so real, so inviting, so edible. I reached out to touch a grape, and Helen slapped my hand. "Bad boy, Ivan, don't touch." She jerked her thumb at Mac. "Honey, go get a hammer and a nail, would ya?" While Mac and Helen were busy in the living room, I wandered into the kitchen. A cake covered in thick chocolate frosting sat on the counter. I like cake. Love it, in fact. But it wasn't eating I was thinking about. It was painting. The frosting peaked and dipped like waves on a tiny pond. It looked rich and gooey, dark and smooth. It looked like mud. I scooped up a handful of frosting. I scooped up another. I headed to the refrigerator door. It was perfect, empty white canvas, waiting canvas. The frosting wasn't as easy to work with as jungle mud. It was stickier and, of course, more tempting to eat. But I kept at it. I scraped off every last bit of that frosting. I may have eaten a little cake, too. I don't remember what I was trying to paint. A banana, most likely. I suppose I knew I was going to get in trouble. But at that moment, I just didn't care. I wanted to make something, anything the way I used to. I wanted to be an artist again. Punishment. I soon learned that humans can screech even louder than monkeys. After that, I was never allowed in the kitchen. Babies. Back in those days, Big Top Mall was smaller. It had a pony ride, a wooden train that bustled around the parking lot, and a few bedraggled parrots, and a surly spider monkey. But when Mac bought me, a baby gorilla dressed in a crisp tuxedo, to the mall, everything changed. People came from far and wide to have their pictures taken with me. They brought me blocks and a toy guitar. They held me in their laps. Once I even held a baby in mine. She was small and slippery. Bubbles flowed from her lips. She squeezed my fingers. Her rear was puffy with padding. Her legs bowed like bent twigs. I made a face. She made a face. I grunted. She grunted. I was so afraid she would fall that I squeezed her tightly, and her mother yanked her away. I wonder if my mother ever worried about dropping us. We always held on, but that's easier to do when your mother is furry. Human babies are an ugly lot, but their eyes are like our babies' eyes, too big for their faces and for the world. Beds. One day, after many weeks of loud talking, Helen packed a bag and slammed the front door and never came back. I don't know why. I never know why of the humans. That night I slept with Mac in his bed. My old nests were woven of leaves and sticks and shaped like his bathtub, cool green cocoons. Mac's bed, like mine, was flat, hot, without sticks or stars. Still, he made sleeping sound like the rumble my father used to make when all was well, a sound from deep inside his belly. My place. Mac grew sullen. I grew bigger. I became what was meant to be too large for chairs, too strong for hugs, too big for human life. I tried to stay calm, to move with dignity. I did my best to eat daintily, but human ways are hard to learn, especially when you're not a human. When I saw my new domain, I was thrilled, and who wouldn't have been? It had no furniture to break, no glasses to smash, no toilets to drop Mac's keys into. It even had a tire swing. I was relieved to have my own place. Somehow, I didn't realize I'd be here quite so long. Now I drink Pepsi, eat old apples, watch reruns on TV, but many days I forgot what I am supposed to be. Am I human? Am I a gorilla? Humans have so many words, more than they truly need. They still have no name for what I am. 9,876 days. Ruby is finally asleep. I watched her chest rise and fall. Bob, too, is snoring. But my mind is still racing, for perhaps for the first time ever, I've been remembering. It's an odd story to remember, I have to admit. My story has a strange shape, a stunted beginning, an endless middle. I count all the days I've lived with humans. Gorillas count as well as anyone, although it's not particularly useful skill to have in the wild. I've forgotten so many things, and yet I always know precisely how many days I've been in my domain. I take one of the magic markers Julia gave me, and I make an X, a small one, on my painted jungle wall. I make more X's and more. I make an X for every day of my life with humans. My marks look like this. The rest of the night I mark the days, and when I'm done, my wall looks like this. And so on until there are 9,876 X's marching across my wall like a parade of ugly insects. A visit. It's almost morning when I hear steps. It's Mac. He has a sharp smell. He weaves as he walks. He stands next to my domain. His eyes are red. He is staring out of the window at the empty parking lot. "Ivan, my man," he mumbles. "Ivan." He presses his forehead against the glass. "We've been through a lot, you and me." A new beginning. We don't see Mac for 2 days. When he returns, he doesn't talk about Stella. Mac says he is anxious to teach Ruby some tricks. He says the billboard is bringing in more visitors. He says it's time for a new beginning. All afternoon and into the evening, Mac works with Ruby. Ruby's feet are looped with rope so she cannot run. A heavy chain hangs off her neck. Mac shows her Stella's ball, her pedestal, her stool. He introduces her to Snickers. When Ruby obeys, Mac gives her a cube of sugar or a bit of dried apple. When she doesn't, he yells and kicks at the sawdust. When George and Julia arrive, Mac is still training Ruby. Julia sits on the bench and watches them. She draws a little, but mostly she keeps her eyes on Ruby. Bob watches too. He's hiding in the corner of my domain under knot tag. It's raining outside, and Bob does not like damp feet. Ruby trudges behind Mac, her head drooping. Endlessly they circle the ring. Sometimes Mac slaps her flank with his hand. Suddenly Ruby jerks to a stop. Mac pulls the chain hard, but Ruby refuses to move. "Come on, Ruby." Mac is almost pleading. "What's your problem?" "She's exhausted," I say to myself. "That's the problem." Mac groans. "Idiot elephant." "Idiot human," Bob mutters. "Walk, Ruby," I say through, although I know she's too far away to hear me. "Do what he says." "Walk," Mac commands. "Now." Ruby doesn't walk. She plops her rump on the sawdust floor. "I think she's tired," Julia says. Mac wipes his forehead with the back of his arm. "Yeah, I know. We're all tired." He pushes Ruby with the heel of his boot. She ignores him. George looks over from the food court where he is wiping off tables. "Mac," he yells, "maybe you should call it a day. I'll close up." Mac yanks on Ruby's chain. She's as anchored as a tree trunk. He pulls harder and falls to his knees. "That does it," Mac says. He brushes sawdust off his jeans. "I am through playing around." Mac stomps off to his office. When he returns, he is carrying a long stick. The gleaming hook on its end is almost beautiful, like a silver moon. It's a claw stick. Mac pokes Ruby with the sharp point. Not hard, just a touch. I can tell he wants her to see how much it can hurt. I growl low in my throat. Ruby doesn't budge. She is a gray, unmoving boulder. She closes her eyes, and for a moment I wonder if she might have fallen asleep. "I'm warning you," Mac says. He breathes out. He stares at the ceiling. Ruby makes a huffing sound. "Fine," Mac says. You want to play it that way? He draws back the claw stick. No, Julia cries. I'm not going to hurt her, Mac says. I just want to get her attention. Bob snarls. Mac swings. The hook slices the air just a few inches above Ruby's head. See why you don't want to mess with me? Mac says. He draws back the claw stick again. Now move! Ruby jerks her head, flinging her trunk towards Mac. She makes a noise that sends the sawdust scattering. It makes my glass shiver. It is the most beautiful mad I have ever heard. Ruby's trunk slaps into Mac. I don't see exactly where she strikes him. Somewhere below his stomach, I think. And I know he must be uncomfortable because Mac drops the claw stick and falls down on the ground and curls into a ball and howls like a baby. Direct hit, Bob says. Poor Mac. Mac groans. He stumbles to his feet and hobbles off towards his office. Ruby watches him leave. I can't read her expression. Is she afraid? Relieved? Proud? When Mac is gone, George and Julia lead Ruby from the ring. It's okay, baby. It's okay, Julia says, stroking Ruby's head. They settle Ruby in her domain and make sure she has fresh water and food. Before long, Ruby's dozing. Dad? Julia asks George. Julia asks as George locks Ruby's iron door. Do you think Mac would ever hurt Ruby? I don't think so, Jules, George said. At least, I'd hope not. Maybe we could all call someone. George scratches his chin. I wish I could help Ruby. But I wouldn't know how. I mean, who would I call? The elephant cops? Besides, George looks down. I need this job, Jules. We need this job. Your mom, the doctor bills. He kisses the top of Julia's head. Back to work. You and me both. Julia sighs and reaches for her backpack. She removes a piece of paper, a bottle of water, and a small metal box. Homework first, George says, wagging a finger. Then you can paint. It's for art class, Julia explains. We're doing watercolors. I'm going to paint Ruby. George smiles. All right, then. Just don't forget your spelling. Dad, Julia asks again, did you see Mac's face when Ruby hit him? George nods. Yes, he said solemnly. I did. He shakes his head. Poor Mac. He turns away, and only then do I hear him laughing. Colors. Julia opens the metal box. I see a row of little squares, green, blue, red, black, yellow, purple, orange. The colors seem to glow. She pulls out a brush with a thin tuft of tail at its end. She dips the brush in water and wets the paper, then taps at the red square. When the brush meets the damp paper, pink petals of color unfurl like morning flowers. I can't take my eyes off the magical brush. For a moment, I am not thinking about Ruby and Mac and the claw stick and Stella. Almost. Julia touches red again, then blue, and there suddenly is purple of a ripe grape. She touches the blue, and her paper turns to summer sky, black and white, and now I see that she is painting a picture of Ruby. I can make out her floppy ears, her thick legs. Julia stops painting. She takes a few steps back, hands on her hip, gazes at her work. She scowls. It's not right, she says. She glances over her shoulder at me. I try to look encouraging. Julia starts to crumple up the paper, then reconsiders. Instead, she slides it into my cage at the spot where my glass is broken. Here you go, she said. A Julia original. That'll be worth millions someday. Gingerly, I pick up the paper. I do not eat a single bite of it. Oh, hey, I almost forgot. Julia runs to her backpack. She pulls out 3 plastic jars, one yellow, one blue, one red. She opens the jars, and an odd, not food smell hits my nose. Julia pushes the jars one by one through the opening. Then she slides some paper through. These are called finger paints, she said. My aunt gave them to me, but really, I'm too old for finger painting. I stick a finger into the red jar. The paint is as thick as mud. It is cool and smooth like a banana's underfoot. I pop my finger into my mouth. It's not exactly ripe mango, but it's not bad. Julia laughs. You don't eat it, you paint with it. She grabs a piece of paper and presses her finger on it. See? Like this. I place my finger on a piece of paper. I lift it, and a red mark is there. I get a bigger blob from the pot and slap my hand down. On the page, when I pull my hand off the paper, its red twin stays behind. This isn't like the ghostly handprint on my glass, the one my visitors leave behind. This handprint can't be so easily wiped away. A bad dream. I lie awake peeling dried red paint off my fingertips. Bob, who accidentally walked on one of my paintings, is licking his red paws. So every so often I glance over at the empty ring. The claw stick glints in the moonlight. Stop! No! Ruby's frantic cries startle me. Ruby, I call, are you having a bad dream? You're okay. You're safe. Where's Stella? She asks, gulping air. Before I can answer, she says, Never mind. I remember now. Go back to sleep, Ruby, I say. You've had a hard day. I can't go back to sleep, she says. I'm afraid I'll have the same dream. There was a sharp stick, and it hurt. I look at Bob, and he looks back at me. Oh, Ruby, he says. Oh, Mac. She puts her trunk between the bars. Do you think, she hesitates, do you think Mac is mad at me because I hurt him today? I consider lying, but gorillas are terrible liars. Probably, I finally say. He ran away after that, Ruby says. Bob gives a scornful laugh. Crawled away is more like it. We are quiet for a while. Branches claw at the roof. A light rain drums. One of the parrots murmurs something in her sleep. Ruby breaks the silence. Ivan, I smell something funny. He can't help it, Bob says. I believe she's referring to the finger paints Julia gave me, I say. What are finger paints? Ruby asks. You make pictures with them, I explain. Could you make a picture of me? Maybe someday. I remember Julia's picture, the one that will be worth $1 million. I hold it up to the glass. Look, it's you. Julia made it. It's hard to see, Ruby said. There's not much moonlight. Why do I have 2 trunks? I examine the picture. Those are feet. Why do I have 2 feet? That's called artistic license, said Bob. Ruby sighs. Could you tell me another story? She asks. I don't think I can ever go back to sleep. I told you all I remember, I say with a helpless shrug. Then tell me a new story, she said. Make something up. I try to think, but my thoughts keep returning to Mac and his claw stick. Anything yet? Ruby asks. I'm working on it. Ivan, Ruby presses. Bob said you were going to save me. I search the word for true words. I'm working on that, too. Ivan, Ruby says in a voice so low I can barely hear her, I have another question. I can tell from the sound of her voice that this will be a question I don't want to answer. Ruby taps her trunk against the rusty iron bars of her door. Do you think, she asks, that I'll die in this domain someday like Aunt Stella? Once again I consider lying, but when I look at Ruby, the half-formed words die in my throat. Not if I can help it, I say instead. I feel something tighten in my chest, something dark and hot. And it's not a domain, I add. I pause and then I say it. It's a cage. The story. I look at the ring layered with fresh sawdust. I look at the skylight, at the half-hidden moon. I just thought of a story, I say. Is it a made-up story or a true one? Ruby asks. True, I say. I hope. Ruby leans against the bars. Her eyes hold the pale moon in them, the way that a still pond holds stars. Once upon a time, I say, there was a baby elephant. She was so smart and brave, and she needed to go to a place called a zoo. What's a zoo? Ruby asks. A zoo, Ruby, is a place where humans make amends. A good zoo is a place where humans care for animals and keep them safe. Did the baby elephant get to the zoo? Ruby asks softly. I don't answer right away. Yes, I say at last. How did she get there? Ruby asks. She had a friend, I say. A friend who made a promise. How? It takes a long time, but finally Ruby returns to sleep. "Ivan," Bob whispers, yawning. "What you said about the zoo? How are you going to do it?" Suddenly I feel as if I could sleep for 1,000 days. "I don't know," I admit. You'll think of something," Bob said confidently, his voice trailing off as his eyes close. "What if I don't?" I ask, but Bob is already asleep. His little red feet dance, and I know he is running in his dreams.